In a bid and on a bold and unprecedented move, President Bola Tinubu shaking up the country's economic landscape by suspending key tax measures, sending shockwaves through the business community and sparking intense discussions about the potential implications. With the aim of addressing concerns raised by manufacturers and stakeholders, this decision marks a significant turning point in the ongoing debate surrounding tax policies and their profound impacts on the nation's economy. But what are some of the potential effects of government's fiscal policy and tax reforms on businesses and the overall economy? A professor of finance and capital markets joins me live in our Abuja studios. In case you don't know who my guest is, Professor Waleke is a financial economist and a renowned professor of capital markets at the Nasarawa State University, Kefi. He was at various times head of banking and finance department, as well as the director of quality assurance. He's a chartered banker, stockbroker, and fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Professor Waleke is the head of the Department of Securities and Investment Studies at the Nasarawa State University, Kefi. Prof, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Tolu. It's indeed my pleasure.
Prof, today I've seen NECA, I've seen MAN, CPPE, I can go on. All of them are applauding President Tinubu for this gesture, for putting this pen into paper. In your understanding as an industry watcher, a player in the industry, and all of that, what is your own understanding of this? Some say the president seems to be so sensitive to the plight of manufacturers and businesses.
Well, let me say it's a welcome development. At least you can see from the recommendations coming from stakeholders, especially the organized private sector, the NASIMA, the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria, the NECA, including the center that is run by my friend, Dr. Muda Yusuf, the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprises, the Telecom Operators of Nigeria. So these commendations have all been coming, and in my view, they are well placed. Well placed because the executive orders are such that would give businesses, a lot of breather. Businesses that have been grappling with so many challenges, especially on the back of the recent currency redesign, on the back of the recent, again, sudden removal of fuel subsidy. So businesses have been going through a lot in recent times, no doubt. So I think this is more like some sort of relief. I also think it's also one measure that will enhance or improve Nigeria's ranking with respect to the ease of doing business. I was looking at the 2020 ranking where Nigeria came up 131 out of 190 countries in terms of the ease of doing business. If you check all the pillars there, whether in terms of starting a business, registering property, dealing with construction permits, resolving insolvency, including protected minority rights. If you look at all of that, even getting accessing electricity, Nigeria, recorded improvements, except in the areas of ease of paying taxes and access to credit. So this will now help Nigeria, to also move up in terms of ease of paying taxes. And of course, the implications of that. It promises to also attract investments, as the case may be. You look at the recent MBS report on capital importation. What do we find? Of course, capital importation, we have been told, increased 1.13 billion in the first quarter of 2023 relative to the previous quarter. But that's still low. And another interesting aspect of that report is that much of it also came by way of foreign portfolio investment, over 57%. So very, very little came in by way of foreign direct investments, talking about 4.2%. And that is where the issue of taxes, come in. When you have favorable, tax environment, foreign direct investments can come in because those are investments that come in to stay. unlike the foreign portfolio investments, that can always leave, at the very slight, slightest shock, which is why we call it shock money. Now, permit me to seize this opportunity to congratulate, Taiwo Yedele on his appointment as the chair of the Committee on Fiscal Reforms. Again, there's no doubt that it's a case of a round, peg in a round hole. And it's time we had those reforms. And one of my recommendations here would be that in also picking other members of that committee, the government should also think of how to integrate the subnationals, because that is the only way you can succeed in harmonizing the multiple taxes that we have in this country. Certain people too, at the subnational level, should be part of that committee, because unfortunately, the constitution that we are currently operating, has some taxes and levies that appear to, overlap. Sometimes the distinction is not very clear. You take VAT, for example, not VAT in particular. I'm talking about stamp duty, capital gains tax, for example. CGT is collected by the FIRS with respect to companies, and also by the states when it comes to individuals. Stamp duty is the same thing. The federal government collects stamp duty. States are also collecting stamp duty with respect to individuals. Of course, personal income tax, we know, largely collected by states, but there are also aspects of that are collected, at the federal level. Now, there is need to harmonize all the taxes that we have and publish them, to be able to reduce this incidence of, multiple taxes. And it's also on this score that I support the idea of having a centralized body that collects these taxes even at the federal level. There is a plan, I understand, to merge the Federal Inland Revenue Service and the Customs, NIMASA, with respect to revenue collection. And that is also what we have you find in some other climes. In the UK, for example, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, is merged. Okay, both customs and the Inland Revenue, operate as a body. Okay, the same thing with India. So what you now find them doing is that they are operating as departments or as units, of a particular body. So the advantage is that it gives the government the opportunity to have a bird's eye view of what comes in. And of course, it also reduces cost of collection, economies of scale, and the rest of them. So I am of the view that the executive orders are they'll be positive for the economy, positive particularly for the manufacturing sector that has experienced in recent times, a drop in GDP growth. In Q1 of 2023, Tolu, if you check it, the MBS report, it says the manufacturing sector growth, dipped, to 1.6%. So, and the previous quarter, it grew by about 2.9%. So, manufacturing sector is, growth rate is declining on the back of some of these challenges that I mentioned earlier. And I think some of these executive orders will go a long way in once again propping up the manufacturing sector and the industry, as a whole in Nigeria.
Prof, very beautiful detailed breakdown there from you, as usual, well expected. I just saw in the news that already Mr. Taiwo Yedele is talking about suspension of VAT on diesel at the moment, and for ease of doing business, of course, that's also a good one for manufacturers. But I would ask you, do you think that this is what we need to improve revenue generation, and of course, to attract the necessary investment? You talked about the NBS on capital importation, and we saw a little bit of drop in what we used to have in Q1 of last year compared to what we have now. Do you think that this clarity can help us improve all of this?
Well, let's not lose sight of the fact that, yes, the government needs, money to run. There's no doubt about that. If you look at our tax to GDP ratio, it used to be 6%. We understand it has gone up to as high as 8%. And this government, I understand, also has a target of 18%, tax to GDP. So yes, it's good to collect revenue, and it's also what informed a lot of the things you find in the Finance Act, which were put there, in line with the previous government's strategic revenue growth, initiative. But having said that, while we are also looking at productivity, because we talk about productivity, the ability of a tax to generate, sufficient revenue for the government, we shouldn't also lose sight of, the other qualities of a good tax. We're talking about simplicity. A good tax system should be simple, shouldn't be complex. We're also talking about neutrality. You don't introduce tax to the point where it, results in distortions, in the economy, for example, leading to high inflation rates, loss of jobs, and all that. Such a tax system, can't be said to be neutral. And for me, another very important quality, which we should also be mindful of when we are making tax laws, is that of convenience. And convenience talks about, of course, convenience from the point of view of the taxpayer, which is also why I welcome the Executive Orders 1 and Executive Orders 2 that, have to do with variation, postponing the implementation of, take the Executive Order 1, for example, postponing the implementation of the Finance Act of 2023 from May to September. And the Executive Order 2 also talks about, varying the implementation period for, customs and excise from March to August. So, and why has that been done? It has been done to provide sufficient time for the taxpayer to, adjust to the new taxes that have been introduced. So that's speaking to convenience. And interestingly, is also captured in our national tax law, in our national tax policy. The National Tax Policy 2017, provides for a 90-day period that, should be given to a taxpayer to effect those adjustments. But unfortunately, that wasn't done in the previous case. So I'm happy that that is being, that is being done now. Now, I also talked about neutrality. The last two executive orders will be speaking to neutrality. You take, for example, the 5% telecoms tax, for example, which a lot of people say, has been quite contentious. In terms of status, again, that is, you have a lot of controversy, surrounding that. And I recall during the last dispensation, the then Minister for, Communications, Issa Pantami, was even against such a tax. And you also take the case of the escalation in excise duties. Okay. Now we understand in the Finance Act of 2022, for example, those increases were made to run from 2022 to 2024. So while the implementation was on, in the middle of the of nowhere, another increase was slammed. So again, that doesn't speak to simplicity. That doesn't make for certainty. There's also, a canon that we call canon of certainty. A taxpayer should be able to know, what to pay at any point in time. So when a small business or a taxpayer has already made some plans with respect to what he or she is going to pay, and then all of a sudden another one is being slammed without enough adequate time to adjust, of course, that will be a gross violation. That will be at variance with the qualities, the canons of some of these canons of taxes, that have been mentioning. So, as I said, overall, I think the executive orders are in order. And it's also important to recognize, you asked a question about, some of the, like the suggestion made by the removal of 7.5%, that's the VAT. Yeah, some will even argue, I'm sure you have heard, even the World Bank has argued that the current VAT rate is low because it's one of the lowest in the world. Okay. Now, what I have with respect to that argument is that, yes, Nigeria's VAT rate may be one of the lowest in the world, but have we looked at the entire basket of taxes that we have? And that is also what I would recommend that the committee should be looking into. The entire basket of taxes, a holistic picture. You don't single out a particular tax and because it is relatively low, you begin to think of how to increase it. Our real problem in this country is not with tax rate. In my view, it has to do more with the tax base. Why I talk about basket of taxes, if you look at our company's income tax today, Tolu, if you compare that with what obtains elsewhere, you also find that we are one of the highest in the world. Okay, large companies in Nigeria pay 30% in income tax. You add some other taxes like education tax, that's 2.5%, which in Finance Act of 2023 was even proposed to be increased to 3%. When you take the effective income tax rate in Nigeria today for large companies, you would find that it's one of the highest in the world. And we know how direct taxes can discourage investment and also hurt companies directly. So the point I'm making is that if we're thinking of increasing the VAT from 7.5% to 10% or 15%, as the World Bank is recommended, we should also be thinking of reducing the direct taxes, such as the company's income tax, to a level that will also make it competitive. In Ghana, for example, VAT is 15%, but their company's income tax is 25%. In South Africa, for example, VAT is 15%, but company's income tax is 27%. So any investor wishing to come and invest in either Ghana or Nigeria, for example, on the basis of tax alone, would choose Ghana because Ghana has a lower company's income tax rate. So we need to do something about our taxes, collectively, to be able to incentivize, investments and to be also able to promote, growth. One of the objectives of tax, a good tax system, should be to stimulate economic growth. Okay, to also help to provide job opportunities. So, yes, government needs revenue, as I said earlier on, but in doing so, again, there has to be a balance. The taxes being introduced must be neutral. It shouldn't be such that would worsen, say, unemployment rate or also increase inflation rate, as the case may be.
All right, there's a good way to live it. I must thank you so much. Interesting conversation, Prof. We could go on and on, but this is what time can take. I've been speaking to the head of Department of Securities and Investment Studies at the National State University, KEFI, Professor of Finance and Capital Markets, Professor Uche Uwaleke. Do enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you, Tolu.
Well, enough understanding there around the executive orders. I'm sure you've been able to pick one or two things, what it means for you and, of course, for your business at this time. Well,